Good day. This looks like a very strange viewpoint of me resting here, and well, I wish I could go lie down and sleep now because I'm tired of working and wanting to sleep. And we find that here in songs it is a very apt thing because there is this woman that says that she sleeps. And I'd like you to imagine yourself in that place where you are super tired after doing something that's exhausting and wanting to sleep. And then the very last thing you want to do when you're in that place is get up. And this is exactly what's going on here because the groom arrives and he tells her that she must get up, but she doesn't want to. She's protesting. She's tired. What is this? It is the most frightening testimony of Jesus that you can ever imagine. That God is using to tell you something about how his redemption works, how Jesus regards the fiery justice, and what are we to do with her after the death of Jesus. It is something that I never thought about, but it's here. It's the very first thing that you need to do. So you need to realize who this woman is. You need to know that she is the only suitable helper of the groom. There's a deeper level of prophecy in Song of Solomon. Because of prophecy that God placed in a woman, it opens incredible wisdom. So what is this with a sleepy firebride? Why firebride? The woman referenced the fiery justice wrath of God. That is the suitable helper for the Messiah to bring life. And he needed to be united to the death verdict in order for God's salvation to be pronounced in a judicially acceptable fashion one day in heaven. If he didn't do that, there can't be pronounced salvation to man, because then she, in the image of a woman unfulfilled, she seeks fulfillment. The death verdict seeks fulfillment. We know that Jesus fulfilled the death verdict. And there's something incredible happening here. We have a sleeping fire. And God is using several images, literal things that we know, because remember, he explains the heavenly in earthly stuff that we know. Why would the woman be so tired? The wrath of God went for him. Fire is fulfilled, and now it wants to rest. Like a human being that becomes tired after its work, this woman, which is God's fire, is now done working, wanting to rest. So where would you place this? Not prior to Jesus' death, not while he was on the cross, not immediately when he entered the tomb because he had to stay there for the specific period, but once all of that was done, the fire would be ready for its rest. Because we find she's alone on a bed in the context of her groom being Jesus who has died, but his tomb bed. Alright, she's there, but she's on her own. Did that happen? Yes, he rose. My heart is awake, she says, and there's your next clue, because your heart, you think about your rib cage, it is a type of enclosement, and in Hebrew the word for a heart starts with that. It's your enclosement. So her enclosement, which is his tomb, what other enclosement did she bring on Jesus? Her enclosing is still awake. He's supposed to be there in full consumedness, staying down if he was one of us that was sinners, but he's not. But that's what you would expect after the fiery justice or wrath of God has gone through you. And the enclosing is still running. One wouldn't expect him not to be there, risen. And so he is. And she says, but I've heard him. I've heard the voice of my beloved. Right, he rose. And he says to her, she must do the same. She must rise again. Open for me, he says. But the fire has got a problem. She says, no, but I want to sleep. I'm tired. What must become now of the fire? And we're going to go there in the next verse. He says to her, she's his sister. In other words, she's the kindred one. She's God's wrath. kindred. He's God's salvation. She's God's wrath. So two hands working together with God. He's working it by himself. She's his love ties with boiling. In other words, my boiling. Yes, the fiery justice and wrath of God is Jesus' boiling. Jesus taking God's wrath's heat on himself. She's his dove. Dove in Hebrew ties with making wine. In boiling in God's wrath. And his perfect one. In other words, the perfect suitable helper for the groom. Remember the issue in Genesis? There's the groom, has no bride, no life coming there. The groom needs a helper. For what? To bring forth life. If the groom is Messiah, what woman, right now the woman being like a metaphor, what does he need to be united to? But God's fiery justice and wrath of God. That's his perfect helper. So he says to her, all right, she's heard his cry. She feels very sleepish and done now. Her enclosing is still going on, but he's pressing on. Her his perfect helper. So he's not forgetting her. One would expect that once he rose, now the fire is done, he's fulfilled the death verdict, and off he goes. But no, he is establishing her. He brings the fire that's burning out to a place of being standing again, and then coming out of that tomb. The fiery justice wrath of God's testimony accompanies him. It's not disregarded even after he fulfilled her. He brings it to standing again. He calls her his perfect helper, his perfect one. And he says to her, his head, in other words, he's shaking, is covered in the dew, water, ties with wasting in Hebrew. So he's covered in the death image, which came because of her, his perfect one, his perfect helper. His locks, if you think about a lock in Hebrew, a lock ties with something that you can cut off, clip. And the prophecy there in Daniel that the Messiah would be cut off not for himself, cutting off ties with dying, not for himself. He says he's cutting off, his death testimony is covered with the dripping of turning things around. Night in Hebrew ties with turning, like a loop that turns, because after night comes day. After Jesus who died comes his resurrection. Jesus took the death, and because he took it, he can turn it in his hand to bring life to us with that as the judicially sound proof that he's got the legitimate right to do it. You see, he is now fully covered in the testimony of his death, pressing on, knocking and saying, she that feels like sleep now must stop that and rise. Okay, so the fire's standing in the support of the death testimony of Jesus. But she's still saying, but how can this be? What is going on? Perfect helper, that is in the metaphor of a woman, is none other than the fiery justice wrath of God. He's boiling, he's dove, he's winemaking, he's perfect companion in order to unite to so that there can be love. So he's reminding her he's fulfilled it all, he has died. She, in his companion that works with him, the death verdict, is speaking of wanting to not get up, sleepy there, going down like a fire that is tired after burning a lot. If you see a fire fully consuming something in the end of it all, where there's no more oxygen and nothing left to burn, it becomes languid, slow, burning lower, wanting, almost like a death image. So she's saying, I sleep. Fiery justice is a type of witness. The fact that Jesus has fulfilled the death verdict witnesses that. So she's complaining. She says, but it can't be. How can I get up again? She's ready to sleep. And once she gets up, it's almost as if she expects him to come and enter and just be there with her. Because, well, she consumed him. He should be there, shouldn't he? Of course not, because it's Jesus and he has the power to turn death. And this is what is going on here. So she's complaining. She's saying, but I can't get up. I've taken off my covering. How can I put it on again? I've washed my feet. If you think about water, it quenches, right, the fire. How can I defile? How can I be established again? How can I, after Jesus fulfilled the death verdict, how can the death verdict still be up and about? How can it rise? Shouldn't he go and sleep in the tomb? But then, we'll speak about that in the next video, and it'll help you to understand how he regards her and how she comes to play from a Christian perspective when we stand before God's throne. How does the groom treat this woman? It's awesome, and it'll help you to understand something that was shown in the time of Jesus with Mary and the conversation between Jesus and her. It's magnificent. See you soon.